Here we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Spirit Healing Academy. I am Reverend Michelle Scrimgeour Brown, and it is truly my pleasure to welcome you all here today. We gather each Sunday as an assembly of people who will teach each other to find the miracle of joyful living from life's circumstance to accomplish that which seems impossible. And our intention with these gatherings is to stimulate thought, create connection, and expand consciousness. Before we get into our usual conversation, I'm going to throw the floor open to anyone who has anything they want to share about what's happening in the community, any events that you would like us to be aware of. If you own a business and you want to direct us towards any of your business functions, please feel free to do so now.
Well, I want to let everybody know that Awaken Life Chiropractic and Wellness Center is open for business, and we're keeping everybody well adjusted, keeping their energy moving to the best of my ability. So if those people need help, just don't hesitate. Come on down in Whitby, Roslyn, and Garden. Looking forward to helping more people. Thanks, Michelle.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Glad to have you working.
Yes, I enjoy it.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Okay, well, I'm Reverend Michelle Scrimgeour Brown of Spirited Healing. I've been seeing clients live and in person again for the last couple of weeks, and I would love to see you. If you wanted to book an appointment, please feel free to do so. Also, we're getting ready to start the next cycle of the In the Past community. You might be familiar with my work in the past, the book and the Oracle deck. If you wanted to join us, this is your week. We're starting to work on building trust, which I think is a really nice dovetail for all of the information that is coming out right now in the world. Okay, with all of that said, let us begin our meeting with our land acknowledgement. As the journey towards reconciliation in Canada continues, and we strive to fulfill the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to actions, it is important that we continue to build relationships and engage in ongoing education. Reconciliation and allyship is a continuous process and one that we all need to fully engage in. With this in mind, we must take every appropriate opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territory on which we reside. Acknowledging the traditional territory is one way to express our respect, gratitude, and appreciation for the Indigenous people who have inhabited and continue to live on the land that we have taken from them. It is a recognition of their continued presence both in the past and in the present. Recognizing this helps to honor the trauma being separated from their land has created within their people, and attempts to foster a safe environment where Indigenous people feel welcome to share their stories with us who are eager to listen. The Spirited Healing Academy is proud to acknowledge the lands and the people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, which is covered under the Williams Treaties. We are situated on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, a branch of the greater Anishinaabe Nation, which includes Algonquin, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. I have to tell you, and I think I said this before I started going live everywhere else, I'm feeling, I said terra-sighted, but what I really think I'm feeling is the power of this moment here. So earlier this week, Tuesdays are always my days to organize myself. I call it my admin day. And on Tuesdays, I schedule out all of my social media. So on Tuesday, I had picked our topic for today's discussion, and I created social media posts about it. And I created the PowerPoint presentation to share on the screen. And then all of the news broke on Wednesday and Thursday about the latest horrific chapter in Canada's hidden genocide and war crimes against the people who lived here before we came. And I thought, Michelle, you cannot have that discussion. So we're here today to talk about how to be allies. And while the jumping off point absolutely was what's happening right now in Canada, the whole conversation of allyship is really important to me as a parent of children in the LGBTQ community. It is a really important conversation to me as someone whose favorite thing is love. Because allyship is really just a study of how can we, with the only experiences and perspective that we have, love all of the people around us who have different experiences and perspectives than we do. And I'm a little nervous to lead this conversation because I'm acutely aware that I am white and that I come from colonialists. And part of, like, the biggest part of your job as an ally is to not take up the space from the people who you are trying to support. So I'm glad there are a lot of people here. I'm glad there are a lot of people who have different experience and background. And I'm really looking forward to creating a space where all of us feel safe enough to say what we want to say. And I want to really, and we haven't talked about this in a long time, we haven't talked about active listening, but today is going to be really key that we are actively listening, not listening to respond, not listening from our place of privilege or perspective, just listening to understand. Is everybody good for that?
Michelle,
Yeah.
for those that don't know what exactly has happened or what you've seen in the news or whatever, and for a later playback later on down the road when someone watches this, can you go over that? Like, can you do that?
Sure. The intention of this conversation is to be far more widespread, more broad in its approach than the news of the day. But what came out this week was the unmarked mass graves of 751 more children who were stolen from their families and forced into residential schools, where the Canadian government and many different Christian denominations ran these things called residential schools. And their intention was to literally cleanse the savage out of them. So these children were denied their language, their hair was cut, they were denied their religion, they were denied any ties to their family, and their families had no idea what happened to these children when they were taken away. Like, it was literally kidnapping. And this is what Canada is built on. And we have, as a white person, I was not told about residential schools. I only just learned about them a couple of years ago, which is appalling because the last one closed in 1997. That's not history. That's current day. That these abuse and traumas were executed upon children is horrific.
Not just the children, the families that those children were taken from.
Yes.
As a mother who lost a child,
Yes.
I can't imagine what those parents went through when their children were taken away and they had no idea what was happening to them.
Yes.
They may have had some idea, but their fear, their heartbreak, like the whole group of people,
Right.
not just those kids who were. Anyway, sorry.
I want, it's okay. It's going to be a very emotional conversation. A part of the reason why I wanted to have a broader context over this is because allyship is allyship. It's less about the issue of the day and more about how you show up in life. So while I'm happy to have provided a little bit of context about the current news, I don't want this to become part of the conversation. Is just that any more than it needs to be. It can provide context. I don't want it to be the heart of the conversation. I don't know if that makes sense.
Can I ask a question, Michelle? Is it allyship towards the Black Lives Matter, the children being discovered in the whole Indigenous peoples of Canada, and also the LGBTQ community? Are we talking about allyship for all the, I'm using the term non-white, non-heterosexual group
Yes.
of people, like the people who get treated, all the people who get treated less than?
Yes.
Okay.
We're talking about the broad context of how to be a good ally, especially in such emotional circumstances. Is everybody okay with that?
Sounds
Yeah.
good to me.
Okay, I think it can be a really helpful conversation. And if you are someone who is on the call that has context to provide a lived experience, I want to hear it. Okay? Because this is your platform if you have lived experience with it. Okay? Okay. So I don't have a presentation, but look what I have, you guys. I have tons of notes. Do you know I've never made notes for any discussion in all of my, what is this, our 6th year? I think we're coming up to our 6th anniversary. I've never made this kind of notes. I have tons of notes here because this conversation is so hugely important to me. And I'm not really sure how to navigate it 100% transparent with you. And I feel like this may become a couple of conversations. So when I started sitting down thinking about how could we approach this discussion, I remembered an article that I had seen printed in the LA Times. And it was written by a psychologist whose name is Susan Silk. She talks about this idea of the ring theory. Has anybody heard this? No? Okay. So the ring theory is a bunch of concentric circles. There's the center circle, and then there's a tight loop around it, and then another circle, and another circle. These are all individual circles, to be clear. It's not like a spiral, okay? There is one small circle, and then another tight circle, and a circle, and a circle, and a circle, and a circle. The idea of the ring theory, it can be summed, so I'm just like, there's too much to share. So that center circle is the person in, the words that she used are in the crisis. That doesn't necessarily apply in a blanket statement, but the person in the crisis. So that could be someone who got a cancer diagnosis. That could be the Indigenous people of Canada. Well, they're not really of Canada, the Indigenous people.
In Canada?
That can be the Black people. That can be the LGBTQ community. That could be any number of people are the center of the crisis, okay? And then the closest circle around it are that person's closest intimates. So if we're talking about a diagnosis like cancer, the person gets diagnosed, and then their closest ring might be, depending on their age, it might be their parents and their sibling. It might be their partner and their children. It is really their people, okay? So Nancy, if we think about your circumstance, when you had your heart attack, you were the center. And then the tightest ring was Philip, okay?
Yep.
And then the next ring outside of that will be, if it, in the case of a child has a diagnosis in the center, the parents and siblings on the tightest ring, the ring outside of that might be grandparents, aunts, uncles. The ring outside of that might be cousins, and so on and so forth. So you can see that the idea is distance from the center of gravity. Are you guys with me so far? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to take your silence as a yes. So the basis of the ring theory can be summed up by saying comfort in, dumping out. So dependent on where you are in relationship to this center of gravity, the person in the crisis. You send comfort in. Nancy, I can't believe you had a heart attack. Oh my goodness, that must have been so terrifying. I'm going to send you flowers. Dumping out. Mitchell, oh my God, Nancy had a heart attack. I'm crying. Oh, that's so hard. But I don't share my emotion going inward, because that makes this crisis that you had about me. Do you understand?
Yeah.
The purpose of the ring theory is to provide context for how you respond in a crisis. So as a white person in a middle-class home, the husband who has a professional job, I have a lot of privilege. So I am really far out from the center of gravity of today's conversation. Which means that when I hear about the Indigenous school uncovering that just took place in Saskatchewan, and I'm starting to brace myself for the uncovering that's going to come, because they've only looked at 5 grounds of 139 schools, and we've already found almost 1,500 dead bodies. So you can be sure there are a lot more. This is just literally the tip of the iceberg. We're going to be dealing with this for a while. So as someone who is not Indigenous, who is not First Nations, who is not Métis, who is not Inuit, I am not in that center. And my job is to send support into that center, which does not look like, oh, my heart is breaking. That is not support. That is dumping out. So I can say to the people who are on the same ring as me, oh, can you believe that's happened? I mean, I can believe it. And I wish I had listened so many years when these people have been trying to tell us what we have done to them. I wish I wasn't so blind. I can say that stuff out. And the hard part is that you have to recognize your social media channel, while it's your channel, is not only your ring. Because other people are on your list. You don't even know who might identify as First Nation. You don't know who might identify as Métis.
So is the question, how do we not dump out, and how do we change so that we're going in?
I love this. Yes.
Okay. So how do you go inwards without seeming that way, I guess?
How do you go outwards?
No, in.
How do we go inwards? How do we take in comfort? Okay, so.
Okay, so wait, then
Yep.
My brain is like downloading all at once. So then that would mean that you would need to take your own self out of it.
Right.
Of like, oh, my heart is breaking, like you
Right.
said, or, well, I mean, it's still devastating news.
Yes, it is.
But yeah.
I want to share something with you. I've started following a great channel on Instagram. It's called Indigenous Motherhood, and it also exists on Facebook. So I've got my Instagram open here because she posted something amazing this week, and I want to share it with you because it speaks exactly to the question you're asking, Mervette. See this? Toxic allyship versus authentic allyship. This is what we want to know, right? How do we not be accidentally toxic and be sincere in our support? Toxic ally number 1, and I think this is where a lot of Canadians are right now. We are guilt-driven allies, which makes us toxic. A guilt-driven ally will be an ally solely because of the personal guilt that they carry because of the actions of those in their bloodline. This form of allyship comes from the avoidance of their own guilt. It is inauthentic and can show up as constantly apologizing, along with obsessively stating that they are heartbroken or deeply saddened. The expectation is for the Indigenous peoples to recognize their allyship, and I can't see because of the captions. There we go. Recognize their allyship in some way in order to minimize their own guilt. Now let's talk about this for a minute, because this is usually the first place everybody goes. And I can see some of you are having facial, physical reactions to this idea. I want to remind you the purpose of this conversation is to feel triggered. And I know you hate it. I know you don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable either, but the truth is the only way forward is to become uncomfortable about what we may or may not be doing so that we can be open to do something different. Okay. So if you would like to comment, this is a great time.
So it's a case of not putting our feelings. That's like this toxic ally, number one, guilt-driven ally, is it says obsessed, constantly apologizing along with obsessively stating they are heartbroken or deeply saddened, is like putting your feelings first up when you really, as well, for me, example, as a white person, have nothing, like it's not to do with me, it's to do with what they're going through. Because one of the things that I've recently realized in reading, Black Lives Matter or the LGBT community or the Indigenous peoples, is I've kind of picked up the first thing I should do is shut up. The first thing I should do is shut up. So I've stopped making any comments. And I learned that from, it was on a Black woman's post when she said, I don't want any white people to comment. And I kind of went, whoa. And then I went, no, she's right. Yeah. So, and not even whether she's right. It doesn't matter whether I think she's right or wrong. But the bottom line is I've stopped commenting. And then I thought, but isn't that standing on the sidelines and turning away and burying your head in the sand? So I've got,
Nancy, that's a
I've got caught up in this first one because I'm saddened, I'm heartbroken, and I want to apologize for them. I want to apologize, but I don't know what to do. So I see myself in this first one.
I think a lot of us can see ourselves in this, yes?
Yeah.
I see some nodding heads.
I think this is the how can you not feel sad by this information, right? Like you hear this information and if you're and have a heart at all, your heart would break for these people, and you would be sad to hear all of this and devastated that somebody would do this to children.
And I think it's important to remember that no one is saying don't be sad about it. We have to remember the framework that I laid out at the start of this conversation that identifies the comfort in and the dumping out. Okay, so you are entitled and in fact must feel how you feel about this information. And you put your sadness out. So to other people on your ring.
The key on your ring.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Got it.
Right. Let me give you another example of where we could apply this notion of allyship that is really close to my home. Okay. When my daughter came out as trans, the center of gravity there was her in the center, right? And then the next closest ring was me and Mitchell, her parents. And then the next closest ring were her siblings and her aunt who lived with us. and her children who lived with us. And then the rings flowed out from there. Then it was the grandparents and the aunts and the other cousins. Okay. This image becomes important because when Layla came out to us, Mitchell and I didn't tell anybody because Layla had told us the ground rules. She would tell us when it was time. And then when it became time, Mitchell and I shared with our next ring, which was my sister and our parents. And when we shared with those people, we also asked my sister to do the difficult job of making sure that no one was sending their fears and their garbage and their worry, their dumping into us. She was the gatekeeper because Mitchell and I were managing our own responses while safeguarding Layla, the center of gravity. Can you see this visualization? Is it helping a little bit? When we bring it down to like a very individual level, right? It is helpful. Now, this is really important to get because the other thing is when we're talking in such broad terms as the indigenous people, that is not one person, right? Which means that they are going to have their own reactions and requirements and responses and what they expect from you as an ally. Some of those people are going to want to hear, I can't believe you had to live through that. I'm listening. I love you. I'm sorry. Think of the Ho'oponopono. I love you. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Thank you. Now, we're not at the place where we can ask them for forgiveness yet. But we're at the place where we can say, I love you. I'm sorry. And you probably got to say sorry out rather than in, depending on the individuals who are in the conversation. Deepak Chopra had some information that I took from his page here in my notes. And he said that the first step is to take responsibility for what you are feeling. So if you are feeling sad, own it. And we have this confused understanding that owning something means that we talk about it ad nauseum. We talk about it with everybody. We need everybody to know what we're feeling. It's an internal thing. Allow you to be with your sadness. Allow you to be with your anger, with your disbelief, with whatever's coming up for you, your heartbreak. You have to feel it. And then clearly identify what that emotion is, because if you're feeling anger, it's probably not just anger. Do you remember the emotion wheel? I don't know if you guys can see this. This identifies in a larger categories like significant emotions. So here we have anger, but anger can actually be broken out into all of these other reactions, all of these other emotions. So when you allow yourself to feel the anger, then you get clarity on what else you might be feeling. You might be feeling betrayal. You might be feeling disillusionment. You might be feeling any number of other things, but you can't get there until you allow yourself to feel the feeling first. You guys with me? It's strange for me because normally this is more conversant, but I know that we're not conversing because it's a lot to take in.
Can I make one point? This
Please.
is different because over the last number of years, I've been reading articles, let your emotions out, because society has repressed their emotions.
Yep.
And so the emotions are masked by anger or just pretending everything's okay when it's not. So this is in relation to being an ally to others. This is a time when we should not suppress our emotions, but just sit with the sadness or anger ourselves, not share it with those who are suffering, because
Share
it's
it
about
with
them.
those on your ring.
Pardon
Remember
me,
the part about your
yeah,
ring.
that's what I meant. That's in connection with this topic of allyship, because
I would argue that that is the way you should move forward always.
okay, never mind. I'm going down a rabbit hole.
No,
Thanks.
not at all, hon. It's a very complex topic.
It
Okay.
is a very complex topic, and it's interesting because as my consciousness has evolved over many years, I view this not only this particular situation, but all kinds of um, differences in how people have been treated throughout the history of mankind. But
Humanity.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, there's a big overarching understanding that I have now that we're all intimately connected. There's no one that you're separated from, and we are affected by everything that happens to everybody, everything we've done to the planet. When you start going down some of these rabbit holes, I had an understanding of these horrific, deep, dark things that have been happening to humanity for thousands of years.
Yes.
And now they're actually coming to the surface. They're actually being revealed. Sometimes they were just talked about in the Bible of sacrificing children and stuff like that. I think that's some of the deep, dark things that have been going on in this situation. And it's almost hard to believe. It's almost you almost have to like deny it at some point. But when you really get it, we're all one. We've all been through this experience of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the evil. Then you do gotta bring it back to love, and you do gotta like
Right.
keep
And I
your
think
emotions
this
high.
point here that's helping us to understand what our unconscious habits and patterns might be that are not received as love by other people. I think it's a really important awareness for us to develop. And I think you're right, Mike, that all of this is coming to light now because we are capable of doing something about it. But right now, our struggle is, okay, so how do we do it?
Exactly.
And so I really feel like I want to have this conversation. And I'm glad you're all here for that.
I'm glad I'm here too. It is and it's challenging because everybody, based on their level of consciousness, will have different ideas of what we should do. How do you repair something like that?
So let's keep going through this little post that the Indigenous Motherhood has put up so that we can maybe get to a little bit more clarity around that, okay? We're still deep in the part of understanding where we are in this. So toxic ally number 2 is the performative ally. And you may have heard this term and been like, I don't really understand what that means. We see this a lot in the LGBTQ community for sure. The performative ally will be an ally solely for personal or commercial gain. This form of allyship comes from the avoidance of their own unworthiness. I think that's a really interesting statement. It is inauthentic and can show up as only being an ally when they need to for social media followers, for monetary and social gain, and more. It can also look like big companies and politicians being an ally for more awareness about themselves rather than more awareness about true social issues. So like a real example of this right now, there are so many ads in my social media news feeds for HomeSense and Winners and their gay pride stuff, but they do not support any gay pride organizations. Like whatever they're selling is just lining their pockets. A great example of this is a neighbor down the street who likes to make dream catchers because they're fun, but she has no connection to their purpose and actually doesn't have right to the medicine of the dream catcher and does nothing with her money to further the disenfranchisement of the actual medicine of the dream catcher. You can see that in my Zoom name, the first thing you see is she, her. Sharing your pronouns is a huge, huge way to be a partner to the trans community. because you normalize not making assumptions about who someone's gender identity is. It's not enough to only have my pronouns. If I only had my pronouns and never talked at all about the struggle and the plight and what I do to help advance their cause and aims, then I am a performative ally. If I only wear flag, like rainbow flags, the pride flag on this weekend, because this is Pride Sunday, and I just go to the parades for the beer tent, that's a performative ally. It's someone who's there for the party. It's not someone who's there for the work. Right now, performative allyship is going to look a lot like I'm heartbroken about what's coming out. Oh, I'm heartbroken about what's being uncovered. Because the truth is that this is not being uncovered. This has not just been discovered. People have known for hundreds of years that these residential schools were in existence. And in fact, it was in the 1960s when the Catholic priests took down the headstones that marked the cemetery of all those kids we just found in Saskatchewan. People know.
The first thing that comes to my mind is, well, then who is responsible? You know, like who's taking the
Okay, so I have two things to say.
everything.
One,
I want
you're
to say
coming
is
at it
like,
from a lens of how do I fix it? We are not in a place to fix it yet.
no, but how do you
No,
even
just hang on, just hang on. We're not in a place to fix it. And maybe you specifically aren't thinking about how can I fix it, but generally that is the subconscious message that white people have in their heads. And I'm not saying you are a white people because I know you're not, but I am. And that is the underlying message. Okay, how do I fix this? We are not in a place to fix it yet. Second, what was the other thing you had said? What was my second point?
I was saying
You were
a
asking.
lot of things.
Oh,
actually.
who's responsible? So the answer to who is responsible is we are, the collective, as one.
Michelle?
As your metaphysical minister, I am viewing the world through a lot of different sort of spiritual information. Okay. And what is happening right now as part of the ascension and on planet Earth and, 3D, 5D, all of the catchphrases you want to use is that we are breaking the wheel of karma. So as Mike said earlier, this has been going on for millennia, right? Like this is not a new thing. As a species, we are violent and we've done horrible, abhorrent things to people for our entire existence. This is not new. And that is true. And the wheel of karma keeps bringing it back and bringing it back and bringing it back. And where we're at now is we are smashing out the wheel of karma so that we can change this. And all of us are responsible for that. We're responsible for creating space for these people to grieve. We are responsible for listening to the stories of what has been denied, what has been hidden. We are responsible to love, not defend, not say, but not all Christians. No, but who cares? No, but not all men. No. And does that provide any insight into what you were trying to ask before I cut you off, Mervet? Remember, you're on mute.
I think you're right, though, Michelle. There is a whole collective consciousness that creates all the different things that happen on this planet.
Yeah,
even bigger than that. But and we're just now waking up. We're getting woken up because of the energies that we're being provided with.
right.
There's now an ability to activate our light body, and we can now see things that we would never been able to see before. So as we wake up, we're going to see there, we're going to move from these dark ages into a golden age where when you know that you're connected to everything, you wouldn't do anything to hurt your brother or your neighbor or anybody else. So we're waking up to that point, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Well, we have to stay committed in that. I'm really cognizant of the time, you guys, and I don't want to leave you all on a bad note. I'm going to skip over these just for a moment because I want to come to this slide. I think next week we'll continue this conversation if everybody's okay with that.
Yes, please.
Okay. And we'll look at those other 2 points on this slide. But I want us to read this now, but how to be an authentic ally so that we can think about this throughout the week. And maybe we'll have space and opportunity to apply it in some spheres. And then we can come back and talk about that too. Okay. So to be an authentic ally, ask yourself the following questions. Am I being an ally to mask my personal guilt or shame caused by my bloodline's actions? Am I being an ally for personal gain? Do I get more followers when I post gay wedding pictures? The answer is yes, I do. But that's not why I do it. Am I only an ally with certain people? Do I romanticize indigenous people in my allyship? Now, some of these we might not have the context for because we didn't look at the other slides. Are my behaviors coming from a place of authenticity? Are my behaviors coming from a place of avoiding my own pain or from a place of being truthful in who I am?
You know what, when I'm hearing you talk about these and then you go back to, you know, my heart breaks for these families, or I'm saddened or whatever. I don't think that necessarily the intention of that is like, oh, you know, put your arm around my shoulder and, you know, comfort me because my heart is breaking. I don't think the intention is that. It's to, you know, do this. What is that? Like, you know what I mean? Like come together in.
There is a faulty piece of wisdom that comes from our traumatized world that says misery loves company. And so that's kind of the idea that you're talking about here, right? Oh, I see your pain. I'm in pain too. Let's share our pain. It's not necessarily the words you're using, and it's maybe not the exact point you were driving to, but you're trying to show camaraderie. Is that right?
I'm not camaraderie. Well, I guess that you're there as an ally, like not somebody who's like, oh, get over it, you know.
The ally doesn't say I understand unless that ally has lived experience that is the same.
Yeah.
And most of us don't.
Yeah, no.
Even Mom, you have lost a child, and you said that at the start of all of this, but you can't understand, which you also followed up and said, you cannot understand what this is like for them.
No.
You lost one child, but they probably lost
all. And I knew where that child was.
And all of their nieces and nephews, and all of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, you knew where that child was. And these people also knew that when their children, if they did get to come back, which didn't happen all the time, but it did, they would not be able to talk to them anymore because they don't even have the same language. Right. Come on. It's brutal.
Yeah. Yes. And we could not begin to comprehend.
No.
Everything they went through. No. And still go through.
That's the key, right? I want you to, as we consider this question of how do we become a more authentic ally, I want I really hope that you're able to use that framework we talked about at the beginning about the ring theory. Who is the center of gravity in this conversation? And where is your place? And what can you say to whom? Where's everybody at?
I feel like we all have something, something in our lives where we can clearly see the divide between what we have been through and people who have never been through something like that. And Michelle, what's sparking for me is, when we had a conversation the other day about me making the Manifestation Unlock program for, parents who have not been able to have a child and they're going to go through the surrogacy program. And, the resonance between I feel you, I know you, I am you, because I'm right there in the trenches with you. Right. And the divide of, the more that someone's like, hey, I'm going to help you be more positive to attract a child into your world and it's going to be magical,
So
like, yeah, because you're like, you have no idea and so it divides even more when people try and come in and assume that place, or assume that they know what it's like to, grow up with alcoholic, atmosphere or abuse or the loss of children.
Whatever the thing is.
I'm sorry? Whatever the
thing is, yeah.
It almost creates more of a divide the more they try, It
definitely does. And even when you bring it back to an individual level, I'm trying to wrap up the conversation because we're already 10 minutes over, but I have to share this because I think you guys will find this funny. So to that point about, we have this underlying idea that misery loves company because we're all traumatized people and we think that's true. I'm not that way. In fact, if I'm sharing something that I'm in pain about, I don't want you to say, oh yeah, I didn't sleep either. And I really wish that my husband, whom I adore, got this memo. Because every time I say to him, oh, I don't think it was the best sleep. And 9 times out of 10, you guys, it's not a good sleep because he's been fucking snoring. But anyway, and then he meets me back with, oh, I get it. I didn't sleep well either. I don't think you're listening to me. And that's the key about what happens with performative or toxic allyship. The people who we are attempting to support don't think we are listening to them. We are filtering it through our lens of how we can relate. And the truth of the matter is that no matter what experience you've had, you probably can't relate, and you shouldn't try to. You should just love them.
So maybe it can just come more back around to, well, how can I help you? Or how can I help?
No.
Is it Michelle?
Because again, hang on, Nancy.
Sorry.
Because Mervette, we're not fixing this. They don't want help.
They just want you to say, oh, babe.
I'm here for you.
What I want to say, sorry, Michelle.
It's okay, Nancy, go.
I was going to say, should we say to ourselves, stop? In other words, shut up. So stop, listen, hear.
Maybe. I think absolutely you should be filtering your lens through, is this going to sound like I'm trying to fix it?
Yeah.
You guys, this conversation has been amazing.
This has been one of the best conversations I think we've ever done, and I've learned a ton. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm really glad that there were a few new people here. Well, you're not new, Jen. We know you before, but we don't know your guy.
I think her guy snores because when you said about your story, he looked and I went, oh, that you can tell there are a couple like me and my husband that snore.
I should introduce him. This is my husband, Jason. He goes by Jay.
Hi.
Hi,
And
Jay.
in all honesty, too, I'm guilty of that like all the time. It's just like, oh, I have a headache. I'm like, yeah, I have a headache too, or so I'm guilty of that as well.
I think most of
Yeah.
us are. I think it's a really normal response, right? Like we've been raised to say, oh, I know, me too. No.
Maybe
As
the
Nancy said,
whole
stop and listen. Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
maybe the whole conversation shouldn't be about what can we do to fix it, because I think if you're being true and if you're being genuine, the people on the other side know if you're they know if you're kind of being fake or not, or if you're just there for whatever gain it is, whether it be like to have followers or to make yourself look better than you are. I don't know what that, but like maybe it goes away from what can I do to help you to what is there that I can do to support you, rather than if we know we're not at a stage where we can fix it, we should at least be at a stage where we can have compassion and have understanding and somewhat kind of like, and just show support. Because yeah, posting something isn't going to say like, I understand what you're going through, but posting, if I make a post about something and it's just to inform, if it's just like, if we can support people by just putting the information out there, then
Right.
you're not taking it over as your own like your own kind of cause.
So when we revisit this conversation next week, I think we will get into more of the education piece. And that, as a white person with the privilege I described at the beginning of this call, what I can do to make the world a better place for those people who don't have what I have, and how, like, I think a lot of, yeah, I do. I think a lot of white people really struggle to understand where they should be in this conversation, because the truth of the matter is there are a lot of different viewpoints. And I remember when the Black Lives Matter stuff had all come to a head last May, a lot of the response was that, yeah, white people, you have to fix it because you built it. Don't ask me how to fix it. You built it. So what our role is going to look like will, I suppose, be different depending on what cause we're looking at and maybe who we're speaking to. But specifically right now, where we're talking about the FNMI community in Canada, our job is to listen right now and hold space for their grief and to believe them. Like, the first step of allyship, you guys, is believing the survivors, period. And that goes across absolutely everything. You believe the people who come out to you. You believe the people who have been raped. You believe the people who tell you they've been abused. You believe them. You don't ask them to prove it. You believe them. So maybe this week we should be practicing that, just believing it. Instead of saying, I
Believe
can't
them.
believe it, we say, I believe it.
And send them your love.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, I got to go because it's Ellie's birthday and I got to take her to a candy store.
Thank-
I love you. Thank you so much for being here, for having this conversation. I know we didn't start with our opening intention and our affirmation of hope because I just have so much to say, but next week we'll do both, okay?
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for
welcome.
everybody for the conversation.
Everyone.
It's
Have an
great.
awesome week, everybody.
We'll see y'all next Sunday.
Live an awakened life, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.